Many of analysts, pundits, and strategists have been giving their thoughts on the state of the political landscape after Trump handily won a second term in the White House. While the diagnosis differs depending on who you listen to, what seems to be a common theme is that the National Democratic Party is now in the midst of a sort of soul-searching effort. But again, and I do want to stress this, these opinion givers are referring to the Democratic Party on a national scale, which does beg the question: how does the Oklahoma Democratic Party feel about the recent election results on a statewide scale? To help answer this question, I invited Alicia Andrews, who is the chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, onto For the Record to see how she and the party as a whole is feeling, since it seems like the dust is finally settling from election night. I'm your host, 7 News political analyst Justin Allen Rose, and this is For the Record. Alicia, I always like to start these interviews off as sort of just a touching on the base. So could you tell those who are listening to this podcast just a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So, again, I'm Alicia Andrews. I am the state party chair, but I actually reside in Tulsa. When I got elected, I was the first chair outside of, the Oklahoma City Metro in 35 years. I got involved in, started paying attention to party politics in during Mary Fallon's reelection, because all of the media was reporting, and the newspaper said that less than 33% of registered Oklahomans participated in that election. 33%. And that's what got me really involved. Most people who are involved in politics in the level that I am, it's one thing that got them there: reproductive rights, civil rights, justice. For me, it's voter participation. And that's what drove me. But before that, I was an active realtor in Tulsa. Before that, I was a consultant that wrote business plans for small businesses. And so, I kind of have a varied background, but I got involved in politics really because I care about voter participation. And I stick around because Oklahoma consistently disappoints us with voter participation. But that's what keeps me going.
So what is it about voter participation, and why do you think Oklahoma has consistently been close to last, if not last, every year in voter participation?
I would, if I had to just say one thing, I would tie it to redistricting. And it sounds like a really wonky answer, but I do tie it to redistricting because in a lot of races in Oklahoma, in the time that I've been paying attention, the way our maps are drawn, there aren't that many competitive races. And so I believe that voters feel like the outcome is predetermined, whether they go or not, that the outcome is going to be what the outcome is going to be. And, my message is you can change the outcome by changing who participates, because the outcome is how the outcome is going to be based on who showed up last time and who showed up the time before that. All we have to do to change what happens is have different people show up, more and different people show up. So I believe our voter participation is as low as it is because I think that people think that the outcome is predetermined.
Is it every 10 years this redistricting process takes place? I know that's on the federal level, but that is that state level as well?
Yeah, state level, it's every 10 years. It's right after the census, just like with federals.
And the legislature gets to determine that, doesn't it?
The legislature and the party in power um, leads the charge. And so if you currently have 80% of the legislature, where is your generosity to make seats more competitive, which would challenge you to make you less than 80%, make you somewhere more balanced? And that's the challenge. If I had my brothers, if I were in charge, it would be nonpartisan redistricting.
Have you seen anything about this new state question that was just filed, the open primary?
I am aware of the open primary. I think the state question 835. I am aware of that petition process and what the motive is behind it. The proponents of that petition basically believe that if we had open primaries and folks from candidates from both parties would attempt to woo all voters and possibly come more to the middle instead of the extremes. That is what they believe. I don't know that I agree, but I applaud the issue only because it is someone taking a serious stab at improving voter participation, someone having the conversation out loud in a different way that doesn't seem very admonishing, but in a different way saying, we all need to be participating in these elections. And maybe if someone who's registered as a Republican, but they know Bob the Democrat is running, they will get a chance to vote for Bob the Democrat, and vice versa. And so if this will increase voter participation, I agree with that. My challenge is, I fear that all the majority party has to do is run multiple candidates, and they would further minimize the vote of we in the minority.
Which is interesting because you hear this line of questioning from the Republican side, at least those from, I would say, a little bit more of the far right conservative part of the base, talking about how this will weaken Republican voices or the Republican voice in the legislature or the voters, what have you. And so it's interesting to hear the minority has that same sort of fear.
I do. I do have that fear. Right now, our party, our state is controlled by the extremes in the majority party. And I don't believe that most Republicans in Oklahoma are extremists. But the way our maps are drawn, it rewards the extreme voices.
I don't mean to cut back a little bit, but I want to pause for a second and explain your position as chair of the party. For those who's listening, they might not pay attention to really the structure of political parties or what that structure really entails. And so you as chair of the Democratic Party, what are you tasked with?
So my responsibility is first to be a voice for the Democratic Party, recruit, support, recruit, elect, and support Democratic candidates from municipal level all the way up to congressional level. Raise money to do those things. That's the short version of what I do. My favorite part is going out to county parties and making sure that people hear the state voice and making sure that people stay engaged. And that's only topped by getting the opportunity to go to high schools and colleges and talk about politics. I love that part of my job.
Everybody tends to denote, the Oklahoma Democratic Party with the National Democratic Party, or the Oklahoma Republican Party with the National Republican Party. But how close do you guys really work with each other in terms of the national, the DNC versus the Oklahoma Democratic Party? Is it really a separate entity, or how closely do you guys work with one another?
So as the chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I am actually a member of the DNC, and I meet regularly with my colleagues, and there's a little subunit, the Association of State Democratic Committees, which are the chairs, vice chairs, and executive directors, that we meet once a quarter. Like, we travel and we meet once a quarter and share ideas and learn from each other. And I bring that stuff back to the state. But there is the national platform, and then there is the state platform. And quite frankly, the national platform is a statement, and so is the state platform. We are part of the national party, but we have tailored our messaging for folks who live in Oklahoma. We can't run on a platform that works in California and works in New York here in Oklahoma. We have to modify it for the voters here. And so are we progressive? Are we more progressive than liberal? Absolutely. But are we as progressive as our neighbors in California and New York? Absolutely not. So they are connected, but the Oklahoma Democratic Party is more tailored to Oklahoma voters.
As you are aware, we just got through with an election. Some people like to characterize it nationally as a red wave, but what do you characterize it as in terms of in terms of the Oklahoma electoral outcomes, at least from the state legislature?
I love this question. So, the Oklahoma Democratic caucuses in our legislature held every seat. Even in seats where people had termed out or decided not to run, and we found other candidates to fill those spaces, those other candidates maintained those seats. So the Democratic Party did not lose a seat in the state legislature, which I'm very proud of, in a state that votes as red as they do and that voted for the president-elect. The Democrats still held their seats, and most of our incumbents actually increased their percentage points of about how many votes they got, which is really great, which says that they are doing the work and that their constituents are happy with what they have. And then in addition, in Tulsa, we elected a mayor who is a registered Democrat. And I say it that way because it's a nonpartisan seat. But when it got down to the primaries, it was actually between two registered Democrats. And so I would say that Tulsa is moving has moved a couple of points to the left. We lost a little ground in Oklahoma County, but in Tulsa County, we moved a little bit to the left. And so I'm proud of our local results, which kind of hammers home the saying that all politics is local. And I think it also speaks to your last point. What is the difference between the state party and the national party? So when we were talking about our state races, Democrats held their own. We did not at the national level, but we haven't almost in my lifetime. So we didn't lose ground.
I would assume we saw some split ticket voting then. If we saw those Democrats did not lose a seat, but we still see, all 77 counties vote red. What do you think within that messaging of those who were still able to hold those seats, even with those, people term limited out or not running for re-election, they're still able to make sure that seat is blue. Why do you think we saw people voting for blue locally, but red nationally?
I think that's attributed to who we have representing us as Democrats. I am blessed that my state representative and my state senator are both Democrats, and I live in my district. It is just short of 50-50 Republican Democrat registration, and what I think happens is that I'm going to use my district as an example. Folks were very happy with the people they know, right? They know Representative Blanchett because she's represented us for a while. They know Senator Dossett because she's represented us for a while, and she's knocked our doors, and we've met her. We've met them both. And so for the folks that they know and can come in contact with, they voted for the people that they knew. Now, on the national level, most people don't get an opportunity to meet the president or a candidate. And if you live in Oklahoma, your chances of meeting a candidate are pretty darn slim. And so it was an idea. And though I would say that the vice president ran a really good campaign, folks didn't get an opportunity to know her like they know Representative Blanchett and Senator Dossett and, Representative Munson and that kind of effect.
They vote for people they know.
They vote for people they know.
In Southwest Oklahoma, I would, at least in my view, I think the Democratic Party had two really good candidates. Allison Oldfield running against Daniel Pay in House District 62, and then Tom Sutherland in House District 64. They both lost. First time running for both of them. Do you think that's just what it's going to take for the Democratic Party to win seats in Southwest Oklahoma? Just keep running and keep introducing yourself to the voters, and that will eventually turn the tide?
Absolutely. And that is what it's going to take. And that is how some of our seats, that's how we won them, by moving the needle a little bit more to the left in the first run and moving it more to the left in the next run. And then by the third run, people got used to seeing that candidate, and they felt like they knew that candidate and voted for somebody that they knew and they felt like they could trust. One of the seats in Lawton where you're talking about, the incumbent has been there for a really long time. He's from there. People know him. He goes back into the district and does things in the district. And so people feel like they know him. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that they get to know Mr. Sutherland and Ms. Offield and understand that there is another presence in the community.
One of my favorite questions I always like to ask people when talking about Oklahoma politics, especially the Oklahoma legislature, is when do you think was the last time the Democratic Party held control of either the House, the Senate, or both? And just last week, I asked somebody, and they said 50 years ago. It must have been 50 years ago, but that's not the case at all. It's always surprising. It always surprises people to learn it was just 2004, basically, that the Democratic Party held tight control of the legislature and held it for so long before that. What happened to cause that drastic change into a switch into the red side for the Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma?
There were a lot of things that happened. So there was the Obama backlash. There was the passing of term limits, straight party voting. These kind of things paved the way and the party that wasn't in power was working to organize themselves. And the party that was in power was comfortable of being in power because they were in power for so long. And so when the Tea Party and just the regular Republican Party saw the shifting in ground, they made hay. They were prepared when, excuse me, term limits kicked in. They were prepared. They had candidates ready, locked and loaded, ready to run in the seats that had been held for such a long time, because now they were open seats. It is easier for any party to win an open seat than against an incumbent. And so they were prepared. And I believe that that's what caused the big shift. But we cannot minimize the Obama effect for sure.
That's really interesting because I never thought of it before. In terms of term limits. And so that was introduced in the early 90s and 12-year term limits. And so it took about 12 years for the Republican Party to really start running people for those term limits to take effect. And then now the Democratic Party are not running people that people know anymore. They're new faces. And Republicans get the same way. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the term limits. And so once the term limits happened, they started preparing. And I wasn't around, actively involved at the time, but I think that we felt like our candidates had really represented it, done all the things, and that we could just put in a new name in that seat and still have that seat, but we didn't have the infrastructure that we needed because we didn't need the infrastructure or thought we didn't need the infrastructure when we had most of the seats.
Some Democratic strategists, at least from the old guard, I would say, somebody like James Carville has been saying that the Democrats have an image problem, that they are not looked upon as the working class party anymore. Do you feel that same way, and maybe with the Democratic Party in Oklahoma, or do you have a different point of view?
I have a different point of view. I respect Mr. Carville, but I know in Oklahoma, the bills that are put forth, the bills that get passed, what people run on, if you compare the two, Democrats run on kitchen table issues of, jobs and affordable health care and access to free public education. Those are everyman issues, and that is the basis of our platform. And that's what our candidates are running on, trying to raise minimum wage, those kinds of issues. That's what we have here. And the Republicans in Oklahoma are baffling to me because they are running on big government issues and government way overreaching, getting involved in what people are doing in their bedrooms and bathrooms. And so what Mr. Carville is saying may be true for Louisiana, but I know that it is not true for Oklahoma.
What sort of policies are we seeing in the legislature the Democrats are really trying to focus on, really trying to get passed, even with a Republican supermajority?
Well, like Representative Melissa Provenzano, who I'm very proud to know, she was able to get expanding breast exams on the second try. So if if you have a breast exam and they find an issue, before she got this bill passed, you had to pay for the second exam to see if things had got cleared up. And now you don't when you have insurance, which is a big thing, right? Democrats ran on expanding Medicare. I know that it was Emily Virgin's idea to get rid of taxes on state taxes on groceries. Now, the governor took it over as his idea, but it was originally ran by Emily Virgin, a Democrat. Raising minimum wage. I can't tell you the number of Democrats in our state legislature who've run bills to raise minimum wage, but because they're in a minority, we can't get that passed. Democrats are running to protect our public education system from the voucher scheme. And so those, in my opinion, are kitchen table, everyman issues that affect everyday Oklahomans, regardless of what their voters registration is. And so those are the kinds of bills, not this exclusionary jazz, like I said, about worrying about what gender someone identifies as, or worrying about, what bathroom someone's using, or trying to track the menstrual cycles of little girls. No one really wants that, but I guess it makes a good soundbite. Those are the issues that the other side are running against and running for. I still believe that the Democratic Party is not the party of elitism.
The political parties can do, they can't do ever so much in terms of getting in front of voters, especially just the party itself. What can the media do in your view? Do you think the media is doing a good job here in Oklahoma? And I know I'm part of the media, ABC affiliate down in 7 News, but don't hold back. Do you think the media is doing a good job highlighting about political issues in the state, whether it be Republican issues, Democratic issues? Or do you think, social media has just taken over so much that the media, even state media here, whether it be the Oklahoman, COCO, K4, KSWO, do you think we just lost so much control that, it's really up to social media now to really affect voters' minds?
I think that social media absolutely plays a big role. I do think that that's true. With regards to, like, I'm gonna call you guys big media. With regards to traditional media, it's interesting. I've been chair now for 5 years. In my 5-year chairmanship, I've watched media do waves, right? So there was a time when truly I was having to knock on doors and beg people, to please, 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 at least, run a statement from a Democrat, ask a Democrat for a statement. And I think we're getting a little bit more coverage in that way, but so much because it feels to me that the media is trying to seem nonpartisan, that they just cover the loudest voices, and the coverage is uneven. It's absolutely uneven. And the fact that we don't have the fairness doctrine anymore also is pretty darn evident. And I am saddened that we also don't have the public service announcement process that we used to have, where, where traditional media covered when elections were, where elections were, and made statements about that in a more robust way than what's happening now. So it feels like, in some respects, the towel has been thrown in with regards to trying to be fair, to give fair coverage. Ryan Walters has an outsized representation in our media. And he's taken a playbook straight out of the national playbook. If I just say the most amount of ridiculous things, I know that I will get covered. But at some point, I think, well, why don't we question him, and why don't we starve him of the spotlight that he wants, and so that maybe he'll just shut up and do his job. But as long as we run to him every time he says something ridiculous, he'll just keep saying the ridiculous things. So I just wish the coverage was a little bit more balanced, and I don't even necessarily mean party balanced. It's just he's not the only news story. We continue to have coaches and preachers who are, I feel like once a week we hear about a new preacher or a new coach who has been arrested for sexually assaulting a student, but it's a blip. And I can't even count how many stories we've heard about the Bibles. So the coverage doesn't seem like Oklahomans have an opportunity to get a full picture of what's happening in our state.
Thank you for that insight. It definitely is a very multifaceted, thing. Like it's really hard. And as you know, like for instance, just not devil's advocate, because highly, I mean, I agree with you to a certain extent. But at the same time, it's like if we don't cover it, but the Oklahoma City stations do, it's like the people down in Southwest Oklahoma is like, oh, it's KSWO not doing their job again, that type of thing. And so it is a hard thing, or both sides. I fully admit that. Um, Something that's interesting to me is that even in blood red states, we are seeing when abortion is on the ballot, whether it's a state question, a constitutional amendment, whatever it is, it seems like it wins out in blood red states, even within those. Do you think there's ever going to be a movement in Oklahoma to put abortion on the ballot?
I desperately hope so. Over the last, let's say, 8 years, our state legislature has continued to attack our ballot initiative process. And every rule, qualifier, additional hurdle makes that process more and more expensive. And what I know is that there has been talk about an abortion initiative, but they're afraid to run it unless they have enough money. They don't want to be the state that fails it. And so I'm hoping that we can somehow get past that, but we've got to get our legislature to stop attacking the ballot initiative process and making it more and more expensive. And well, I mean, we can talk about why they're doing that. But I think that that's why we haven't had an abortion ballot initiative thus far, because it will never make it through the legislature through regular process. It would have to go on a ballot initiative.
About those initiatives, I think a lot of people don't realize how lucky Oklahomans truly are about these initiatives. Because not every state have them. I grew up in Virginia. They don't have a ballot initiative process. So for those listening, basically it means that in Oklahoma, if they get enough signatures, we can actually put a question on the ballot for Oklahomans to vote on to change what we want to see changed. We don't have to go through the legislature. Other states are not so lucky. So what do you think? Some parties, we tend to see we saw with that open primary state question when it was filed. So I forgot who said it, but he basically said we might need to look and see to make these things a little bit more harder to get on the books. And so in your view, why do some people think it should be harder for citizens to place things on the ballot for themselves and their other citizens in Oklahoma to actually vote on themselves, direct democracy?
So that's exactly it. I think direct democracy and citizen-led democracy, absolutely, we are lucky that we do have the process. We need to avail ourselves of it more often, frankly. But the challenge is whenever a progressive idea gets through the ballot initiative process, more than 50% of the time it passes. And that explains the reticence of allowing the process to work its way out, because the voters voted for Medicaid expansion. That is a progressive idea to open the books, and we had over 200,000 more Oklahomans get insured as a result of that. The people voted for criminal justice reform, which is a progressive idea, and we had a record number of nonviolent offenders who haven't return to prison, get out of prison and become productive citizens of our state. So whenever we put most of the ballot initiatives are progressive ideas. And so when the people vote for that, I think it scares our non-progressive legislature into believing that they are losing control. This is about power and control, and we should be a citizen-led democracy, but they're trying to make that part harder. And I think they're making it harder because their ideas aren't as popular as it would look based on our representation.
Alicia, is there anything else you might want to tell the viewers? Listen to this about the Democratic Party, about yourself, or about the upcoming legislative session, maybe?
Actually, I want to talk about something that you didn't mention.
Okay.
The first week of December, we will have candidates filing, and not just Democrats. Candidates will be filing for municipal offices, depending on what county you're in. It could be school board, it could be city council, but that is happening in the first week of December. And those elections traditionally have really poor voter participation, And those are people who live in your neighborhood, right? Your school board member lives close to you. Your city councilor lives close to you, likely closer than your state representative, likely closer than your congressperson, and absolutely closer than the president. And we need to pay more attention to those races that are close to us. And so I just want to encourage everyone to pay attention to who's running in city council and school board, because those races are coming up. Elections are on February 11th. And this is how we change what happens in our state, is those folks that live close to us. Those bottom of the ballot candidates are the ones that affect our lives more closely than president or Congress, quite frankly.
So I got another question just based off of that. We mentioned earlier in this interview about, they vote for people who they know. If for those potential candidates who maybe has aspirations to be a state rep, a state senate, is this where they should get started at? And
This is
these
the
more
bench.
local.
This is absolutely the bench. That's the first place I look when I'm trying to figure out somebody to run for House. Who's on the city council in that district? Who's on the school board in that district? Is this something that they might be interested in? And so this is the bench to get you some experience running for office, get you some experience serving the people and building up your chops of getting to know your constituents. This is the place. And so if you're thinking about running, school board and city council races in a lot of communities, filing is in the first week of December.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alicia, for joining me and talking to me. And anytime you want to, talk again about politics, I'll be happy to have you on.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you guys for reaching out.